What's up, everybody? Welcome to Model Breakdown. This is where I look at one particular kit and talk entirely too long about it per ramble. I say kit because some stuff is just one model, some stuff is a squad, and I'm not going to break down a squad over. If it's a 5-man squad, I'm not going to do 5 rambles on it for running each individual model. I'm going to talk about it overall. So, with that said, I'm going to talk entirely too long about the kit overall, give my thoughts and opinions on it, likes and dislikes, give some thoughts on collecting and painting it up, and then give some thoughts on what, if anything, were to be done to them. Would I like to see a redo, and what do I think should be redone if they were going to remake the models tomorrow? So, with that said, I've talked about individual models a couple of times already with the Monolith and Abaddon, so now we're going to venture into my first ramble for model breakdown on a squad. And for that, we're looking at the Eldar. And we're looking at the Aspect Warriors known as the Warp Spiders. The Warp Spiders are my favorite of the Eldar Aspect Warriors. Visually, lore-wise, this is really cool. You know, models that run around and teleport around the battlefield causing havoc is something really cool to me. So, really like these guys a lot. So let's ramble about them. So with that said, looking at the Warp Spiders overall, I like these guys. I do know that these are an older kit. It's a resin kit now, a Finecast resin type kit now, which shouldn't scare you away. It's really the horror stories that were more for the when Finecast first came out. They definitely have gotten better, I feel. Always gonna have the potential for issues are gonna be there, of course, but it shouldn't scare you because it's that now. They used to be pewter, and I'm glad they're not pewter anymore. Um, Personally, I'm just not a fan of pewter models. Outside of Battletech, that's the only really option you have. But anyways, so I like that they have gone away from the pewter for these guys, but it's the same molds basically. They just clean them up for the resin stuff. These are older sculpts, and the nice thing about the War Spiders is they don't have the typical easy tells that you have for older sculpts, and you typically get those when it comes to cloth and leather effects. Look at Shrike's model. You can tell he's an older sculpt because of the cloth and the leather tabard stuff he has is very thick at the base of it. If you hold the model and look at the underneath of it, it's very thick, the cloth and the leather effects. Look at newer plastic stuff, they've gotten it very thinned out and it looks more flowy and whatnot. Now, it doesn't make Shrike a bad model. It still looks great. It's just one of the tells you can see for an older sculpt. The War Spiders have some tells, but it's hidden a bit better because of they have the lack of cloth. But still, the tells are there. It doesn't detract from their model. I think because they were a pewter model, back in the day, pewter was the way to get extra detail. That's why they hold up today still. They're very normal today in terms of detail, you could say, but it's crisp enough. The clarity is there. They look the part. They don't feel like they are worn out, or they don't feel like they don't belong, or they are obsolete necessarily. They feel very normal now, which, you want your aspect warriors to feel a little bit above normal, perhaps, but they're very passable, and that's fine. So I like them, and I think you can still have fun with them today, model wise, and still make them look great with your paint jobs and whatnot. Um, with that said, a couple of tells for the standard warp spider. You got to look at the weapon. The weapon they're holding. First off, all the weapons are held in virtually the same exact pose, with the only difference being the legs. So the weapons being in all that same exact pose really shows you it's an older sculpt. It's not the best tell out there, because some modern stuff has very similar posing across a squad, but that's definitely one way you can look at it. The other way is the wide-legged stance being across the board for the most part is another tell. Back in the day, it's basically how things stood when they sculpted them like this. But the biggest tell is the way the weapon is suction cupped to the chest. Their right arm, the weapon, and the left arm are all kind of compacted up against each other and against the body because they're just one piece sculpted. There's no detail in between the weapon. Or there's no detail of the chest and the weapon when they touch. They're all physically held together because that's how they were sculpted. And that's the biggest tell. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean, oh, it's a terrible model. It's just one way you can tell for sure. If this was a modern model made, it would be plastic, obviously, and the right arm would have an air gap between it and the body. If the left arm would have more of an air gap, the weapon would be held out a little bit from the body itself. You would have it would be built to kind of rest against it, but you can see detail between the two, and you can't do that here. Still, it looks fine. It's not like, oh, it looks terrible because of it. You have to nitpick to look at some of the tells that it's an older model like that, but it still looks good. The Exarch tell is in the fact of again the posing, and he's got such a silly pose. Why I like the Warp Spiders overall, and I would have no problem collecting a squad like this if I were so inclined. The Warp Spider is a little silly. He's posing. It looks like he's at like a flex off. Like, yeah, I'm flexing. What of it? So it's a little bit of a silly pose. And if you look at the blades on his arms, they're very thick. They don't really come down to a point like plastic model or plastic bits do now. It's very thick, where it would normally come down to a blade edge. So that's his tell. But again, very slight. Nothing to make or break the situation. It's just some ways you can tell, hey, older model. So the Warp Spider Exarch is a little bit silly posed, sure, and there's really a lackluster posing at all because there virtually is no posing capability. Well, there really isn't any posing capability on your end for Warp Spiders. It's just how they're sculpted, and only one is really sculpted truly different from the rest of the squad outside of the Exarch, and they're all holding their weapon in a way that they're just sitting there. They're not shooting it the way they're holding it. So you don't really have that much of an action thing going on. But still, I think they look good enough. The detail is there. I like how the Exarch has a little bit extra detail given his position. I'm a fan of it. I do enjoy it, like I said. I think I've said that multiple times now. So I really like these guys. But they're definitely an older sculpt. They definitely can stand to be redone. Before I get into that, though, one of the nice things about collecting and painting these guys is there's not much to worry about aside from painting. For the squad guys, the regular rank and file Warp Spiders, you're cleaning up because they're one piece and you're painting them. So you just do a nice little cleanup job and you paint them. The Warp Spider Exarch comes in 3 pieces. His spinneret weapons, his range weapons, and his backpack are 2 separate pieces. The range weapons are 1 piece, the backpack's another piece, and then his whole body and everything is the 3rd piece. So that is some assembly there. That's the most assembly you're going to be doing. But even though it's very simple, it's still dry fitted to make sure things are fitting together the way they're supposed to. And then, carefully glue them. You might even want to paint them up and then glue them, depending upon what crazy detail you're going to try and do. When it comes to painting up these guys, given the nature of their colors, I would use a light gray base coat. It'll make the red be that much bolder. It'll make an easier time of doing the white. Doing the weapon effect for the spinneret weapons, I don't have much of a way I can really be of help for that. Aside from, you might want to try doing light to dark instead of dark to light, given the nature of the colors here. Putting yellow over even a light orange is going to take a lot of coats, where if you start off with a yellow or near a white yellow at wherever you're going to put it, top or bottom of the weapon, and then just paint the whole thing yellow and then grade in the orange to the near red. That way might be easier than going from a darker orange all the way up to a yellow, if that makes any sense. So that'd be my one suggestion, although some pro painters out there might say that's a terrible idea. But it depends on, I guess, on how you're going to feather it in or blend it in. But if you're just doing it in thin coats and just gradually, I think it should be okay regardless to help you out. So yeah, with that said, time to look at these guys in terms of being redone, because I think most of the Aspect Warriors for GW stuff needs a redo. And the Warp Spiders are no exception to that. I'd love to see them be a multi-part plastic kit, and while we're not getting quite the same posability, capability of and customization potential innately in the kits anymore like we used to back in the day, still being a multi-part plastic kit would give you some head variants, would give you some options that you don't have being what they are now, which is a glorified blister pack. So that would be great. It would give us different posing, especially with the capability of GW's plastic technology now being basically at the cutting edge of it. We could perhaps get a model pose like it just came out of a teleport and is firing. You can have a bit more dynamic stuff going on. Look at Harlequins, for example. Some of the Harlequin stuff out there is really dynamic. And the Warp Spiders could definitely benefit from that and will look great doing it. The Exarch needs a repose. He doesn't need to be flexing his guns anymore. He can have maybe one arm up and the other arm's like he's punching, like he's blocking and punching something, or just have something better than what we got going on here. For sure. I don't know if he has the option in the Codex anymore to have the heavy weapon or the heavy version of the Spinneret like he could in the past. There's definitely a weapon option from what he has now versus something else. I don't know if he has it anymore. If he does, then giving the ability to build him that way would be nice too. But all in all, just changing up the posing capability of the model via a multi-part plastic kit would be great. It would allow the Exarch to look way better than he does now. It would give actual capability of seeing some warp spiders pose like they're firing their weapons, which is really cool, or would be really cool. So do I think they need a redo? Yes, not because it looked bad, but because it would make them that much better, give us some different poses, some action going into these warp spiders, which are a very dynamic squad. Warp spiders in the lore and the fluff and the way you should use them really is going to be a squad, very mobile, dynamic squad. So having them model wise kind of reflect that would be really cool without being silly, of course. So that would be pretty sweet. But anyways, that's it for my thoughts on a redo of them. I think they need to be updated just by proxy of them still being that old sculpt. A new setup for them would look great. It would make the backpacks probably separate from all the bodies, I would imagine. The arms would be separate from the bodies. Maybe the weapons would be connected on one hand or something. But you would get a lot more detail where there isn't any because of how the model's one piece. And plus crisper and perhaps even additional detail, some heads variants and the like would just be really cool. I also really like, and I don't want this to change, that they're all wearing helmets. I don't think there should ever be an unhelmeted Exarch or an unhelmeted Warp Spider, especially given the nature of what they do. I think the armor is their only, you wouldn't want a bare head exposed to the warp when you're teleporting, and the way they teleport is to basically jump into the warp and jump out again. You think you'd want to be fully armored, so I like that it's reflected in their model. Anyways, what are your thoughts on the Warp Spiders? Do you like them? Do you dislike them as an Aspect Warrior? They're one of my favorites. I think they're really cool. If there was multiple ways to build these guys up, if they basically just introduced a kit of Warp Spider armor and then different arms so you could build like rank and file guys and whatever, I would build if I could, I'd build a whole army of just Warp Spider looking dudes. I didn't think they look really cool as armor goes. Anyways, that's just me though. Share your thoughts in the comment section below. Any questions, comments, requests, or concerns, of course, share those as well. And until the next one, take it easy.